head of your class back in Hong Kong. Well, you are just going to be such a great help to your mother here, Kim Chang. Now, it seems like you don't speak a lot of English, which is going to be a problem, but no worries. I got your mom a job at the factory, and you get to go to school. My dad's a quiet man, and he appreciates the silence. Whenever I speak to him in English, he always returns a foreign favor. See, for him, speaking Japanese is like a walk in the park. Well, I imagine speaking English is like climbing a barbed wire fence.
Every day when I was 5, my older sister would play teacher. Her students were me, a stuffed rabbit, and an American Girl doll. At the end of each day, she'd line us up at the end of her bed and teach us whatever she learned in school that day. Now, she teaches ESL at an elementary school in Boston. And every week, she tells me stories about her students. Like Anna, who doesn't know how to read in Spanish, much less English, but she still wants to be a writer when she grows up. Or Juan, who chooses to study inside at recess so that one day he'll be able to teach his own brother. Now, these kids are good organs in a sick body. According to the National Center of Education Statistics, there are more than 4.8 million English language learners enrolled in U.S. schools today. However, in light of public school budget cuts, these students are often overlooked. States like California have implemented full inclusion ESL programs, where teachers are restricted to using only English in their classrooms. But how are students supposed to improve when we don't give teachers the resources necessary to help? As a once shy, quiet girl who was terrified of public speaking, ESL transformed me into the confident woman standing in front of you who may have a tendency to talk maybe a little bit too much. But if ESL has taught me anything, it is that my voice is important and that I should speak my mind. Read My Lips, a program featuring the poetry The Bridge by G. Yamazawa and The Rigged Game by Dylan Garrett, The Prose Girl in translation by Jean Wook, articles from Hamlin University, and studies done by the University of Sydney and the Bilingual Research Journal. Because students who you struggle to understand still deserve to be heard.
See, my father is a chef. He'll add extra syllables to his sentences like seasoning, something that tastes better in his mouth. If I were complaining about hunger, he'd tell me to
go get that cheeseburger to Burger King.
See, my father's accent is bumpy, like the conversation between airplane tires and American concrete. His words have trouble landing. His tongue knows turbulence. In this study, teachers felt limited and trapped by the new laws, as they were not able to implement what they felt were the best teaching practices, such as using first languages to provide clarification or assistance. Students too felt the ramifications, fearing that they or their teachers could get in trouble for using Spanish. If the kids don't jump high enough, the school loses money. And now improving a school by picking its pockets is like tuning a guitar by ripping off the strings. Learning to read in a new language before you can even read in your own is like learning to walk while a pit bull is chasing you. Like learning to sing with the conductor's fist down your throat. On television, some senator preaches that throwing money at an urban school is like feeding caviar to your dog. They just don't know how to appreciate it. I mean, come on. If these parents can't take care of their own children, then why should we? Tell that to Anna, who has my sister translate newsletters aloud to her father because he too was never taught how to read. Tell that to Juan, whose mother and baby sister are still in Guatemala, whose father works 3 jobs. His accent is thick, and his words stick together like the vinegar rice on his working hands. Well, he spent more time cooking for people than working on his speech because he knew standard English wasn't going to feed his children. The recipe is his way of talking to Americans. It's how he tells them what his heart is trying to say. World Map Quiz. I didn't know what to do, so I glanced at the sheet of paper next to me. And then suddenly the sheet of paper slid out from underneath my fingers. Mr. Bogart is standing over me with my test in his hands. No cheat sheet. Although I had basic English courses back in Hong Kong, my old teacher's accent in no way resembled what I now hear in Brooklyn. So I just say, I'm sorry. Although I didn't know why. He handed me back my sheet of paper with a large 0 on it. I had lost any claim to intelligence here. You never learn, you fail the test. You never learn, you fail the test. You never learn, you drop out. I know. I am lucky enough to be one of the winners of this game. Handed a head start and a rule book in my own tongue. But the winners of a rigged game should not get to write the rules. We are telling these children who have spent their whole lives in the deep end that they'll learn how to swim if they just float out a little farther. Everyone thinks that I'm stupid, Mom. And I can't find the words to tell them that I'm not. I'm not stupid. I know the answers, it's just no one is listening. And no one can understand me. So yes, I have been skipping school. But you don't know what it's like. They're always frustrated by the things I don't understand, and I keep apologizing, but I don't know what for. I swear to you, Mom, that I'm trying my hardest. I just can't do it. Something's wrong with me, and I just can't fix it. And she looks at me, and she's quiet. And then she says, hey, maybe I can talk to him. Tell him what a great student you are, and for a second, my heart catches flight. Then I picture it. You know, Mom talking to Mr. Bogart with a few English words that she knew. And so I tell her no. I will try harder. But that meant that I had to go back to school. Students in this study cited partiality towards bilingually taught English courses. Reasons given included being able to better learn English basics, being able to communicate more effectively with their instructor, and being more encouraged to attend class. Because students did not feel the amount of confusion and frustration they had felt in monolingual English courses. School is supposed to be a stable place in these kids' lives. But since when does being a teacher mean having to swim out to help? You know, since when does being a teacher mean having your hands tied as the schoolhouse burns to the ground? We are leading these children along a track built in circles as the lungs fill with smoke, telling them it's their fault. But they can't find the way out. Yes, Mom. I have been skipping school. But can you blame me? I see that some of you are crying. I know I haven't performed in a while, but was it really that bad?
So you're probably wondering why I just gave that speech, other than the fact that Dr. Stallo asked me to, and when the superintendent of your school district asked me to do something, I think you do it. But what I want you to take away from my speech is nothing negative. My speech wasn't made for this event. My speech wasn't directed toward this school district. But it's merely to put into context our year's theme of relationships matter. What I want you to understand is how pivotal your role is as educators and people who are seeing these students every day in these students' lives, because you can be the change that turns a negative educational experience into one that is positive. So with that being said, thank you for letting me share my speech with you, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Stallo to elaborate.
I should give her the next 2 hours. Thank you so much, Lynn, for reminding all of us that regardless of our role as educators or as child nutrition services staff or as bus drivers, regardless, we have an incredible impact on the lives of our students every day. So welcome back, staff, and welcome to the 2019-20 school year. Our theme this year, as Lynn shared with you, is We Are PLSAS, Relationships Matter. I spend a lot of time each year thinking about a theme that will allow us to think about the context that we have right now, to think about what our work is going to be this year, and to figure out how we can rally each other around our collective mission, which is to educate all learners, to reach their full potential as contributing and productive members of our ever-changing global community. We Are PLSAS unites us, and Relationship Matters provides a bold statement that people are the center of all that we do. We educate, we develop, we inspire, we support, and we influence and love each other. And we simply cannot achieve our full potential as an organization without relationships. I chose the theme this year for the human connection to remind us of the importance that we have in each other's lives, and most importantly, the importance that we have in the lives of our students. I chose this theme because this work is really, really hard, and it's really, really important, and none of us can do it alone. I also chose this theme because for the 30 years that I've been in education, I've heard the term initiative too many times in a negative context. And one of my goals this year is to help all of us have a shared understanding of how our priority work works together and is in relationship with one another in order for us to make sure that our mission for all kids comes to life. Relationships are about gratitude. First of all, I want to thank the Child Nutrition Services team for providing that delicious breakfast this morning. And to DJ Slick and DJ Tool for spinning some tunes. And to Brian Melody and Steve O'Neill for building deep relationships with those students and for building up their passion and interest, because someday we are going to hear one of these students playing big time for sure. Thanks Dr. Bizik and the custodians for getting things ready, to the high school staff for hosting us. Dave Tuma, thank you for always being responsive to our needs. I was going to break out in a little Alice in Wonderland, but I think I'm going to hold that for the production this weekend. Thank you to new staff members for choosing Prior Lake Savage area schools. Please know that we are here to support you, we are here to learn from you, and we are excited to be in relationship with you. Thank you for those of you who have chosen again to come back to PLSAS. Thank you for your lifetime commitment to learning and for building a culture where relationships really do matter. Thank you to the DSC staff and the staff that have been here all year waiting for our return. I also want to thank the team that I work most closely with, our executive directors, principals, coordinators, who are our learning leaders of our organization. This team has been relentless this summer. They have done heavy lifting. I see Maureen Mullen out there, literally some heavy lifting in terms of construction. They've done heavy lifting to prepare for a new year with huge hearts. And for that and this amazing team, I am truly grateful. Prior Lake Savage Area Schools is led by a school board that has a clear district vision and supports the work that we do each day to ensure that that vision comes to life. Please join me in thanking the school board members who are here today. Please stand. Board Chair Lee Shimmick. Vice Chair Stacy Ruel. Treasurer Jonathan Drews is with the people building relationships. Director Michael Nelson. I don't know, Director Melissa Enger here today? Okay, I think the rest of the team was unable to be here, but I'm grateful for their support and for what they do for all of us each day. At this time, I'd like to invite Chair Shimmick to say a few words. Yes.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. I've been here a few times, and each time I'm here, I just love the energy when you walk into the school, and it's awesome. And I'm very proud to represent Prior Lake Savage Area Schools. Earlier this year, I had the opportunity to listen to Joe Schmidt, who's a local sportscaster, and his theme was on impact. And I started thinking about that with all of the staff here and how much impact you have. He didn't talk about the kind of impact that you get when you earn to be a Major League Baseball player, MVP of a league, get a batting championship, and he didn't talk about being the best coach, the most winning coach. He talked about the impact that all of those people had on one or two individuals through their lives. One of them, who we all know is a local sports hero, he had impact with a student when he was in high school that set a trend that helped some of these other students that were more challenged to do better and to feel comfortable and successful. He had a lot of impact on that child. And today I challenge you to have impact on your students, to make a difference with your students. They'll remember that. They'll remember that forever. So that's my challenge to you. And I want to let you know that relationships really do matter and that the school board does support you, and have a great year. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee, for your leadership in those words. I love this time of year when staff come together to share ideas, to catch up with one another. I've had a chance over the last couple of weeks to be with staff as they've come together. Our custodial and maintenance staff have really had some amazing challenges this year, and I can't thank them enough for the work they've done in all of our sites. If you had seen this high school 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, if you had seen the ALC 2 days ago, you would be wondering how we are going to be ready for students, but because of their work and the work of our partners, we are. Our new staff have joined us. Our build teams have been studying data in order to prepare for the skip goals and the work that you're all going to do. Our commitment to relationships provide opportunities, even in the summer, for our students and for many of you to share knowledge with your professional colleagues across the state. We learn from each other. Relationships matter. Coaches and advisors understand that supporting and developing students, regardless of wins and losses, is why relationships matter. Our child nutrition services staff promotes healthy meals, and they serve those meals with love. Thank you. We had a very last minute change to a staffing assignment last week, and an elementary teacher was asked to move from one building to another, from one grade level to another. I received a text with the picture on the left on Thursday morning from Principal Jennifer Molitor. I was with the high school staff at the CLR training, and this is the text and picture I received. Relationships matter. Over 15 staff members showed up this morning to help Taylor move to Red Tail. She's all moved. Glendale staff are so amazing. Barb and Red Tail staff have been so welcoming. Hashtag proud to be a Laker. I am too. The Student Health Service team gathered to learn strategies and to build relationships to support one another. And one of my absolutely favorite traditions is when Prior Lake High School Student Council students are standing outside the school and into the entrance as staff open on opening workshop day. That is one of the most genuine feelings of love, support. There's hugs, there's energy, and I think that speaks so much and represents as a whole what you do every day to develop relationships with students, because on one of their last vacation days, they were here greeting you, and that's where they wanted to be. Our theme speaks to our relationships with people, and it also speaks to the importance of the relationship of all of the work that we do with and for people. Our strategic plan outlines our promises to our stakeholders, and it gives us both permission and responsibility to do whatever it takes to use those values that we have and to engage fully in the implementation of the best practices that are aligned to our strategic directions so that we can achieve our mission. We focus our district work on goals of student achievement, student engagement, and operational excellence. And these aren't separate initiatives, but rather they indicate our improvement theory. We believe that if we continue to implement with fidelity the best practices that we've laid out, that will increase outcomes and opportunities for all students. That's why we're here, and that's our promise to our students every single day. The magic of how our district and how this work happens is because of the great people, because of all of you, and the implementation of that work every single day. So the center of our priority work, as you know, is personalizing the learning experience for each and every one of our students so that they can achieve high levels of learning, so that we can close achievement gaps, and so that they can be engaged in relevant learning in really positive learning environments. You've embraced and led the development and the advancement of this work. In the past 2 years, over 150 staff members have attended either a personalized learning summit, bringing personalized learning to scale, or project-based learning workshops. You've not only attended those workshops, but you've implemented all across the district. And every staff member over the last 2 years, do you remember the Post-its that we had 2 years ago, where I think the question was, what is instructional excellence? And all of you had opportunities to write words on there. Those words all contributed to the Laker Learning Framework, which we'll continue to work on over, I think Kevin says, 5, 6, 7 years. But this is going to be our continued work to ensure that we've got student-centered, personalized learning happening in every classroom and in every corner of our district. You've helped lean into our equity and excellence work through collaboration with other districts, through promoting caring conversations, which I know you're going to continue, and in your learning and leadership on your CLR journey. And you've not only built systems of supports for all students, but you're now engaged in learning from our MTSS audit in order to make our universal instruction stronger, our intervention systems more robust, and our enrichment programs better, because you all know that one size does not fit all. In order to achieve student achievement and the learner experience and advance that, we must make sure that we understand the integration of how we use our resources. We've worked extensively over the last 4 years. As you recall, let's see, year 1, let's go out for a referendum, didn't pass. Year 2 that I was here, let's plan for a new referendum. Year 3, we passed a $109 million referendum because of your support. And in the last year, we've done tons of construction, which will continue, so that we've got innovative learning spaces for our growing student population. Our relationships with our community and with our construction partners have allowed us to design and now to build these innovative spaces. that Bridges ALC will be ready for students to enter tomorrow, and it's going to be an amazing experience. Relationships are going to matter throughout the year. We've got a lot of change coming, and as we celebrate, and we'll celebrate together the opening of Hamilton Ridge next year, we know that there's going to be some emotion this year, just as there was with the boundary changes last spring. There's going to be emotion as we determine which staff are going to decide or move to which places. But we've got a lot of relationships and trust that we can count on for that. We've added space and renovated spaces to most of our schools. Jeffers Pond and Red Tail Ridge have new kindergarten classrooms. At Westwood and Edgewood, we now have connected those buildings, so those are gorgeous spaces that you'll have to see. Both middle schools will have additional classrooms, cafeterias, the Twin Oaks Auditorium will be renovated, and as the high school, as you notice, we're working on some parking lot stuff, which you definitely noticed thanks to your flexibility this morning in the shuttles. The IT classrooms will be opening. Some of our classrooms will open mid-year, but this building will really be under construction for the next year. So I want to thank all of you who were flexible during the construction last year and will continue to do that this year. It's amazing how much work can be done while the buildings are being occupied. Our third strategic direction helps us with our culture of innovation. It's one of our district foundations. Relationships have allowed you to trust one another and to trust students in doing things differently and to advance our goals around innovation. Prior Lake Savage Area Schools also has a long tradition as an East STEM district and caring about our relationship with our environment. It's important that we continue to ensure that we have a standard plan in place and that we all know what it means to be an East STEM district. We were recognized as a district-wide Green Ribbon Sustainability District in 2012, and we want to continue to sustain those practices. So one of the things that we're going to do this year is have some district-wide goals around recycling, just to make sure that our students and us are all back into those ideas. Our new strategic direction that was formed last year through a strategic plan process with our community and also supports the ideas that you shared through the idea doc last year is the relationship of a safe learning environment that nurtures the social and emotional needs of all of our students. So we'll spend some time this year, we'll take a look at the research, we'll take a look at the work that we're doing in district right now to meet the social and emotional needs of our students. Things like our PBIS work, responsive classroom, our CLR strategies, second step advisory, student engagement with great instruction, and Laker time to determine areas that we can celebrate and places that we know that we can improve in order to serve kids. We also will engage in ongoing work to ensure that our schools are safe. A team's been working all summer with our community partners around ensuring that we have a plan in place, a reunification plan in place, should a crisis ever occur. And you'll hear more about this work as we start the school year. And none of this would be possible without the engagement and relationship of our students, staff, community, and families. Prior Lake Savage Area Schools has been named one of the best school districts in Minnesota by NASH, coming in at 8 out of 342 public school districts. So rise in the rankings last year, we were at 14th, and the year prior we were at 15th best school district in 2017. And here's one of the main reasons why. Of districts with the best teachers in Minnesota, we came in at number 3 in the state. And I would extend that not only to teachers, but to all staff that we have across the district. Relationships and trust with our parents continues to be strong, as you can see from our parent satisfaction surveys. Student survey results such as these do not happen with all staff building strong relationships with students every single day. And together, all staff continue to make Prior Lake Savage Area Schools a special place to do meaningful work on behalf of kids. That last statistic there is one of my favorites. That 98% of certified staff or 94% of certified staff and 98% of support staff indicate that they're proud to be associated with Prior Lake Savage Area Schools and its brand. That is Laker pride, people. And because of the culture that you create, you make our really hard work and really important work really fun. Take a look at what PLSAS has in store for us this year and start getting your ideas around your own talents. See, you're thinking already, aren't you? We can practice right after this if you've got something going on. Relationships with people matter, and understanding and being able to speak to the relationship of our priority work matters. Organizational excellence and improving student success is never about just one thing, but about a consistent implementation of best practice over time. And that's what we're doing in a very intentional way together. And I'm confident that's what we're going to continue to do as we kick off 2019-20. Thank you for all of that. I knew last spring that I wanted to kick off the school year with a theme about the importance of relationships. And then I had a chance to hear Dr. speak to a group of superintendents in school board meetings in April. And I knew that he could add the research and credibility to my beliefs and experiences about not only the power of relationships, but he could provide a framework to give us some shared understanding of both why relationships matter and some strategies to help us build developmental relationships. Kent recently did a TED Talk that will be released in September. Kent Pickell is an educational leader who has worked at the school, district, state, federal, and university levels. Throughout his diverse career, he has sought to bridge research, practice, and policy to help young people from marginalized communities learn and thrive. Kent is currently president and CEO of the Search Institute, an internationally recognized not-for-profit organization that conducts applied research and develops practical resources that enhance the capacity of schools, youth programs, and other organizations to help people be and become their best selves. Prior to serving the Search Institute in 2012, Kent served as the founding executive director at the University of Minnesota's College Readiness Consortium, where he led the creation of Ramp Up to Readiness and the Minnesota Principal Academy. Kent served as the executive director of research and development in the St. Paul Public Schools from 2000 to 2005. And from 1995 to 2000, he served in the Clinton administration as a White House Fellow, assigned to the Director of the CIA, Special Advisor to the Deputy Secretary of State, and Special Assistant to the Deputy Secretary of State. Kent began his career as a high school teacher in his home state of Minnesota. He holds a BA in East Asian Studies from Yale University, a Master's in Education from Harvard University, and a Doctor in Education from the University of Minnesota. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kent Pickell.
Good job. Get that big picture of me off the screen and that long intro. It is such an honor to be with you here, and I'm loving the Alice in Wonderland stage because I did just do this TED Talk, and they like bake into your mind, don't move off this red dot that's on the stage. And so now my brain is actually all on fire here because I'm like, I can move sort of everywhere. It is such an honor to be with you. I did start my career as a high school teacher actually here in Minnesota in Bloomington, and so I know what this day is like. It's both anticipation, excitement, and oh my God, where'd the summer go? So I want to try and just share with you a little bit of what we are learning through our research on developmental relationships that hopefully kind of reinforces the very good work that it's very clear all of you are doing here in the district. Assuming my clicker works, it's good. That's actually a blank slide for a second, because one of the things I thought about putting some remarks together here today is I thought that I'd actually start from a personal space. Because my work on developmental relationships that we're going to talk about here for the next 45 minutes or so, really for me begins at what I have to say was probably the lowest moment in my life. I was a young dad. I was married with 3 kids, a 4-month-old baby, a 3-year-old, a 7-year-old, and my wife Tanya was diagnosed with terminal cancer. As you can imagine, our world pretty much stopped at that moment. But she fought that disease with pretty extraordinary resolve and energy. That was the day after she finished the walk for the cure for 60 miles with her father and her sister. And those are our kids, Lauren and Adam and Victoria. But in 2006, we lost her, and I found myself a single dad with some very young kids and had to switch jobs and was really pretty much grasping for the right direction. And luckily, I had a lot of support in my life at the time, not just from my family, but also from these 2 people. Those were the people who ran the preschool program in a church basement in St. Paul that all 3 of my kids attended. The woman's name was Indrani, and the husband's name was Siva. They both originally from Sri Lanka. He was retired and didn't really work in the school, but helped out all the time. And Indrani took an extraordinary interest in all of my kids. And when my wife Tanya died, she actually closed the whole school for the day so that all the teachers could come to the funeral. And paradoxically, I was at my wife's funeral, and I was worried, what did all those parents do for daycare? Because, you know, if you're sort of an educator, it sticks in. So I had about 2 weeks where I was kind of home with the kids, and then I worked out with Indrani how we would bring Victoria, who still went to the school, back into the school. And I came a little bit after the parents had dropped them off, and Indrani met me at the door, and she took Victoria down, and she's just a master educator, and she integrated her with the kids. And then she came back and followed me out into the parking lot, and she said something to me that really has shaped my personal and professional life ever since then. She said, Kent, from this moment on for you, it all depends on the relationships. The relationship is a thing in and of itself. That's your main task. And she was always saying these really profound things and then turning around and going away. And so she did that. And I was sitting there in the church parking lot in Highland Park in St. Paul saying, what does that mean? And so for the next 6 years, I did everything I could to try and actually make the relationships with those 3 kids the center of my existence. Now, in 2012, luckily I got reinforcements because I got married to Katie, and we added her kids, Thomas and Molly. And as you can see, I'm such a nerdy dad. I do things like force them to wear Schoolhouse Rock t-shirts on family vacations. But when I got to Search Institute in 2012, Indrani's words were still ringing in my ears. It all depends on the relationships. And it seemed to me that what I never had as a parent, but also as a teacher, I never had a sense of how you build those relationships. What goes into building not just a connection with a kid, but a developmental relationship, a relationship that takes a kid from here to here, in whatever area of life you're working with that young person on. So what I want to tell you about today is how we have been engaging in using the science to open that black box of relationships, not just in schools, but also in out-of-school time programs and also families. But before I do that, I actually share a little bit of my personal story. What I also want to do is actually share a short video that I think broadens this emphasis on relationships from the one I just shared to people from very different walks of life. And we'll use this short video as a jumping off point for my brief overview of what we're learning through the research. So the guys in the booth can bring it up. Whoops, we're going to go back to click on the video. So on the screen, I couldn't do this with the remote, but there you go. Thanks.
Hi, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Have you thought about your success? No? Excuse me, sir? Have you ever thought about your success and who's helped you become successful?
No.
Have you ever thought about your success and who has helped you become successful? Haven't really thought about it. really been the most influential in helping you achieve success, who would that one person be?
It would be my children.
Maybe my mother.
I would say my dad, all around, hands down.
Zita. Well, tell me about Zita. Without her, I wouldn't have a cafe today.
Surprising.
What I want you to do is I want you to call Zeta, and I want you to read this letter to her out loud.
Okay, here goes.
Hello?
Zeta. Hey, it's me.
Hello, Dad.
Hey, baby, this is Mom.
It's gonna be weird a little bit, but we were shooting a video here.
I wrote a little letter because you motivate me daily, and I just wanted to say thank you.
There's so much that I could say to you right now.
Thank you for being there for me all the time.
You always ask how your mother's doing. Just checking in is so helpful.
You're a strong woman that raised me to be a man that I am today.
You've helped me so much achieve one of the greatest dreams I've had, to own my own place. You've had my back through everything, even when I'm questioning who I am or what I'm doing. Oh my gosh.
I'll always remember how proud you were when I graduated high school and then college.
I appreciate you for thinking about me before thinking about yourself. This is why you are my friend, brother, business partner for the rest of my life.
You always remind me of my greatest self and showing love and gathering people together.
I love you more than you will ever know. Hugs and kisses, Mommy.
Aww. I know this is not something that I usually say, but just wanted to call you and tell you that.
Thank you, I love you, brother.
Okay. Alright, bye.
Thanks for being there.
Oh, babe. I believe in you wholeheartedly, and I could not have done this with anyone else.
I love you forever, and thank you for being you.
I love you too. Good night.
She was shocked.
How did that make you feel?
Amazing.
What did you learn from this activity?
It just put things back into perspective for me to let me know that it wasn't just me. The reason why that I've achieved so much, it was a village.
Why do you think it's so important for you to have this village of support to help you achieve success?
When you feel like you can't do it, there's going to be somebody there to say, you know what, get up and try it again.
Thank you for allowing me to have this kind of experience.
You're welcome. Yeah.
So I've seen that video a million times, and my favorite person changes every time I see it. Right now my favorite is definitely the guy who calls Aquabeer. And a lot of you were laughing when he said it's going to be a little bit weird, so you may not have heard, because then the next thing he says is, so please don't curse. Now, some of you, though, you may be thinking at this point, having actually taken a look at this, that, okay, this is a no-brainer. The fact of the matter is that relationships matter was not something you needed somebody to come in and tell you on your first day back of the school year. The critical thing that was on my mind back in that parking lot in 2006, and that is probably on some of your minds now, is not do relationships matter, but how do we build them? It's getting into that zone where relationships are not this mystical thing that some teachers, some youth workers, some parents are just great at, but something that we can actually make a practice, and that we can continuously share strategies with each other and continuously improve. And so that's what we have been at since 2012 at Search Institute. The research that we've conducted moves in three basic ways. We've gone out and we've done exhaustive qualitative research, talking to kids, parents, youth workers, teachers. We have reviewed the scientific literature on the power of relationships, which is voluminous, but very often never makes its way into the hands of people like you working directly with kids. And then we crunched the numbers. More than 5 million kids have participated in Search Institute's studies of what we call developmental assets in kids' lives, and we looked for associations between the kind of relational connections they did and didn't have in their lives and their outcomes in a wide range of areas. And then we tested those theories through quantitative analysis, mostly using surveys, which is one of our main research methodologies. And what that has resulted in is 5 critical elements of a developmental relationship. And I'm going to go through each of them really quickly right now to try and give you a quick sense of what we really are learning are absolutely the keys to building those relationships that help kids be and become their best selves. They are expressing care, challenging growth, providing support, sharing power, and expanding possibilities. Now, you are going to receive, if you have not already, a short one-page summary of this, and so you don't need to commit it to memory or take pictures of the slides here on the screen. And this one-pager will show you that not only are there 5 elements in a developmental relationship, but under each of them are very specific actions that the science shows us bring that element to life in kids' experience. So let me quickly go through each of those 5 elements, and I'm going to illustrate what is at the essence of the element with a quote from a kid or an educator on the side of the screen, and then briefly touch on what we're learning through the science. So the first element, it doesn't surprise anybody. The old saying that people don't care what you know until they know that you care is emphatically being proven true by our research. And the critical factor, though, in helping a kid feel you care about them is that they feel they matter. That if they didn't come back tomorrow, you would miss them. And almost every data set we look at, there's almost an inflection point between kids who feel they do and they don't matter in the relationship. So how do you help a kid feel like they matter to you? 5 critical actions. Being dependable, truly listening to the kid, conveying how much you believe in that kid, being warm, including non-verbally, and encouraging them, pushing them to step beyond their comfort zones. The next element of a developmental relationship, equally important, is challenging growth. And the critical idea there is that you're pushing kids to continue to get better. One of the easiest ways to see challenged growth at work is to look at our best athletics coaches. They're going to be working with the kid on the team who's struggling, who's not getting the skills right, but they're not going to be saying to the kid who's a star, you're good, you don't have to practice. They're also going to be pushing that kid to go further. And in a developmental relationship, remember, this isn't just a nice connection, it's one that moves a kid forward. So that's a mix of 4 different actions. Setting high expectations for kids, stretching them beyond their comfort zones, holding them accountable for their actions, and helping them reflect on failures to make meaning of when they make a mistake or when something doesn't work. Third element of a developmental relationship is providing support. And the critical idea there is helping kids complete tasks and achieve goals. And that might seem, again, like a no-brainer, but we see a lot of settings in which people are either doing everything for kids. The helicopter parent is a real phenomenon that research is confirming today, where we are taking away from kids developmentally necessary opportunities to learn, grow. But at the same time, we're not just leaving them on their own to figure it out themselves. And so providing support is a mix of helping kids navigate circumstances they don't understand, empowering them, building their confidence, advocating for them at moments when they need it, and setting boundaries for them. Sometimes people ask us, why is setting boundaries in providing support? It's partly there for quantitative reasons, because that's what the data told us. But really interestingly, when we went out and we interviewed kids about the people and adults in their lives who had made them better, with striking frequency, they mentioned the adults who set boundaries in their lives, but they did so from a place of caring. So I know that when you set a boundary or a limit on most of your students or your own kids at home, they rarely look at you in the face and say, oh, thank you for that developmentally beneficial boundary. But when you ask them after the fact, with striking frequency, they remember the people who cared and limited them. The one that actually most stayed with me when we were doing the foundational research on the framework was a teenager who had been in and out of juvenile detention 3 times. And when our researcher interviewed him about that, they said, well, how do you feel about that? He said, well, actually, I kind of like it in there because they don't let me do whatever I want to do. Next, sharing power. That's all about giving kids respect and letting them have a say, voice and choice. And sharing power is a mix of having kids feel respected, especially for those of you at the middle and high school level. Research is showing that there is a heightened biological sensitivity in adolescents to feeling respected. They're trying on adulthood, And frankly, they're looking for reasons to feel disrespected, in a sense, which doesn't mean we bend over backward and do whatever they want, but we're sensitive to it. Feeling included, collaborating with them, and giving them a chance to lead. And finally, the fifth element of a developmental relationship is expanding possibilities. That's introducing kids to new people, new places, new ways of being in the world, and that's a mix of inspiring them, broadening their horizons, and connecting them to people and places that help them learn and grow. So, one of the things that is really important to make clear as we introduce these 5 elements is that actually we really can measure these things. This is a data set from 25,000 middle and high school kids, and I'm not going to take time to go through this in great detail, but you can see the way kids felt about their parents, their siblings, their friends, their teachers, and staff if they went to an after-school program. And so we are finding through the research that this stuff is not just touchy-feely things that we can't ever wrap our arms around. We actually can measure it with validity and reliability, which opens a new space to think about relationships, as I said at the beginning, not as this mystical thing that we can never learn from, but as something that we can actually begin to measure and work on. Now, even though we boiled this framework down into 5 separate elements, of course, we'll never get to the point where we can say a kid's development needs 20% expressing care and 35% challenging growth. They all mix up, and the easiest way to see that is using the first 2 elements, challenging growth and expressing care. If you could imagine that you could graph how challenged a kid feels on the vertical axis there, also imagine that you could graph how cared about a kid feels on the horizontal axis. And in the work that we're doing in schools, youth programs, increasingly places like even juvenile justice, social service agencies, we see kids spending a lot of time in one of 4 quadrants that we could kind of imagine. The first is high challenge, low care. I'm pushed here to the max, but nobody really cares about me. We also see kids who spend a lot of time in high challenge, high care. And that's a space where we want every kid to spend at least part of their day. I'm pushed to grow, to learn, to change, but boy, do they really care about me here. Unfortunately, we also see settings where kids are spending time in both low challenge and low care. You're not pushing me much, but you're not nurturing me. And then, there's places where we love them to death, but we really don't actually push them to grow and change. There's one moment when you can actually see all 5 of these elements together at one time, and it's that one. It's one that everybody in this room has lived through, and probably a lot of you have helped people, young people, little people, find their own way through, and it's when an infant takes their first steps. Just think about the first element, expressing care. Try and get that baby to walk. If you're red-faced and impatient, walk, damn it! Not that. Challenging growth. This is like growth on steroids. That little brain has never before made those little legs work in that way. Providing support. You are literally there to catch them when they fall. Sharing power. I don't know about any of you, but I was not able with any of my kids to say, you know, let's have Victoria walk on Saturday. We'll set up a video camera. We'll have the grandparents over. We'll have snacks. It's a good time. You can create the conditions to have them walk. You can encourage them to walk, but they're going to walk when they're going to walk. Kind of like they're going to learn fractions when they're going to learn fractions. And then finally, expanding possibilities. That little infant's worldview is literally going to get a couple feet taller. And those little legs are suddenly going to be able to go into every space in the house. And if you have a 2-story house, you better put up one of those gates or it'll be a death trap. So it's those moments when all 5 of these elements of a developmental relationship really can come together. Now, if I were you sitting here on the cusp of a new school year, I might be like, oh great, I have to do all that stuff the superintendent just talked about, and now I have to remember these 5 things of a developmental relationship, and I have to do it all the time with every student I serve. The good news is you don't. What kids need over the course of their development is to experience these elements in a diverse array of relationships. And what's really powerful is when a school community embraces this framework, it's not your job to do all 5 with every kid all the time. It happens organically. After I finish this presentation, you're going to see a short video of a true story of one teacher who changed a kid's life by expanding possibilities at one critical moment. So it doesn't mean you do everything all the time, but when we express care, when we challenge growth, when we provide support, when we share power, and when we expand possibilities as adults in kids' lives, it adds up over time. Now, if I were some of you actually sitting out there who are not particularly touchy-feely and maybe who didn't get a little choked up at the video I showed at the beginning, some of you, let's just say maybe it's a high school social studies teacher like I was, I'll call you Dave, whoever you are. Dave, you're sitting there saying, okay, this is nice, but does this matter? Does it connect to outcomes? And the fact of the matter is, yes, the science shows that this framework connects to a lot of the outcomes that we're all striving for with kids today. This is that same data set of 25,000 middle and high school kids, and you don't see this in research very much. It's a linear relationship. For every adult with whom the kids experience these 5 elements, they are dramatically more likely to be responsible, to have good decision-making skills, to be caring adults. Similarly, they're less likely to have attempted suicide, use alcohol, use tobacco. We just recently finished a longitudinal study of teacher-student relationships connected to kids' motivation to learn, connected to kids' outcomes, and this picture summarizes the big conclusions of that multi-year study. When kids experience relationships with their teachers characterized by these 5 elements, they are dramatically more likely to be motivated academically, and they have much higher GPAs. They also have higher standardized test scores if the measure is a growth measure like on the MAP test, not a proficiency rate like on the MCAs. So it does correlate. What's really interesting from the same study, these relationships with kids matter for all kids, but the kids who seem to benefit most are the ones that many of us are very focused on reaching. And you mentioned, Superintendent mentioned, the equity work that you're doing here in the district. You can see white kids who experienced high levels of these relationships with their teachers were 9 times more likely than those who didn't to be highly motivated. But look what the differentials were for students of color: African American, Asian Pacific Islander, Hispanic, and non-Hispanic. So all kids benefit, and the kids who potentially need them the most benefit the most. This is actually an interesting slice of data from the same study, and it shows in one high school how kids experienced our framework. And for the purposes, I know we're moving fast here, for the purposes of brevity, let's just look at expressing care. 22% of those kids actually said, no, I don't experience much these expressing care from my teachers. 36% said, yeah, I get it. It's not often, it's not intensive. 26% said, yep, I'm there, I'm in that zone. 15% said, I get it a lot, that feeling of caring. And you could look at the other bars in the same way. In that study, we were also able to look at what the teachers in that same high school thought. So for the purposes, again, of brevity, just focus on that express care line. And I'm going to now show what happens when we look at what the teachers felt about the relationships they had with those same students in that high school. 50% of the teachers said, I'm deeply engaged in caring about my kids. 41% said, I'm in that positive zone. 9% said, I don't do that caring stuff that much, and nobody ranked themselves at the bottom. Now, what does the difference between those 2 slides mean? We're actually trying to understand that through our research. It doesn't mean kids right teachers wrong or teachers right kids wrong. But one big takeaway is that when it comes to relationships, perceptions matter. And while you may be actually expressing care or challenging growth or sharing power powerfully with some kids in your class, or if you're a counselor, or if you're an administrator, the question is, are all kids experiencing those kinds of developmental relationships with you? One final point, because I mentioned my personal story about families. Families are not something that we control or directly influence within a school environment, but they're the environment in which kids most powerfully experience these developmental relationships. In another study, we're finding that when kids experience these 5 elements in relationships with their parents, they're 21 times more likely to be able to manage their emotions, 13 times more likely to persevere through difficulty, 9 times more likely to have a strong sense of purpose, and 5 times more likely to be socially responsible. So now if we go back to Dave, my hypothetical high school social studies teacher skeptic, Dave may be out there saying, wait, Kent, everything you just showed me is correlation, not causation. So a little bit into nerd research territory here, but there's 2 things that go together, don't necessarily mean one causes the other. So all the data I just showed you, on one hand, could mean that kids who experience these relationships therefore have good outcomes, or it could mean these kids just have everything together, and so everybody wants to have relationships with them. It's kind of like saying the sun comes up in the morning because the rooster crowed, instead of actually getting the causation in the right way. Or more predictably, using a school analogy, we adopted a new curriculum, the test scores went down, therefore the curriculum didn't work, ignoring the fact that maybe the student composition changed or something else was going on. So the way that we try and control for confusing correlation with causation, increasingly in research, is using what's called a randomized controlled trial. And we don't have to go very deeply into it, but the basic idea is we do something with some kids and we randomly test the condition to see if there's a result. So I'm going to show you one randomized controlled trial that I think powerfully captures the power of relationships, especially as it ties to the fundamental work you're doing here in the school district, which is helping kids learn. It was a study that happened in one middle school, and so we have to actually be really qualified in extrapolating from this one study because it's only happened once. The researchers are replicating this study in more middle schools, and we're going to have to see if the result I'm going to tell you about now happens again elsewhere. But it's not a study that's easy to replicate because they followed kids for a long time after middle school, which, as we all know, is not an easy thing to do. It was one study that took place in the 7th grade where kids were told they were going to learn to write an essay about their personal heroes. There are about 88 kids replicated 2 years in a row. You'll see I'm mentioning race here because race turns out to be important in the story of the study. Gender was also examined, it didn't have an effect, and socioeconomic status was also examined, and it didn't have an effect. So race is the differentiator in this story, but it also tells a story that could apply to many other differences in kids' lives. The teachers in the study who were the regular teachers of these middle school students happened to be all white. So what happened? The kids were told, and the kids never met the researchers who conducted the study, they were going to write an essay about their personal heroes. And I know you can't see it from out there, but this is actually one of the essays that one of the 7th graders wrote. And they were assigned this by their regular teachers. And so this kid wrote, "My hero is Barry Sanders. I'm writing about him because he's my idol. I look up to him. He also set the NFL's record in rushing yards. I want to be just like him." So the teachers graded these essays like they would normally grade a 7th grade essay with no interference from researchers. So this is one of the actual essays back from a teacher where he or she made some changes in grammar, punctuation, but also asked some good questions about content, like what does it mean to be a hero? Or this is good but needs more development. What will Barry Sanders do when he's too old to play? So up to this point, the researchers have had nothing to do with anything other than the normal process of teaching middle school students to write. But here's where they stepped in. They asked the teachers to write on their a slightly enlarged Post-it note one of 2 messages in their own handwriting. And they had them ask them to write it in their own handwriting because they wanted the kids who would eventually see these notes to think it was a direct message from their own teacher. But in fact, the 2 messages were carefully scripted by the researchers. And here's what those messages were. The first was called the neutral expectations message, and the second was called the high expectations message. Here's what the neutral message was. I'm giving you these comments so you have feedback on your paper. Here's what the high expectations message was. I'm giving you these comments because I have very high expectations and I know you can reach them. As you can probably guess, what happened next was the researchers took the student essays and took the teacher messages and they randomly placed them onto the student essays. They gave the kids back their essays in a covered folder individually to lessen the chance that they would immediately look at who got what note back. The kids were told to revise the essay and hand it in a week later to correct the mistakes and improve the content based on the feedback that they were going to get. There was no extra credit required, and there was not going to be any punishment other than failure to turn in the assignment. Then the researchers carefully analyzed who returned the essays, and here's what happened. Again, remember I told you in this particular study, race emerged as the important differentiator. So for white kids who got the neutral message, here's your feedback, 62% chose to revise the essay. 87% who got the high expectations message chose to revise the essay. Really shockingly for the researchers though, what happened with the African American kids was the big takeaway. 17% chose to revise the essay when they got the neutral message, and 72% chose to revise the essay when they got the high expectations message. I didn't put it up here because the number was too small to be statistically significant, but they also gave the kids a survey at the very beginning of the school year to say, how do you feel about your teachers? For African American kids who said, I don't trust my teachers, 0% revised the essay with the neutral message, 80% revised the essay with the high expectations message. Now what was really striking about this study is they didn't stop 1 week later with who turned in the essay. The first data point they followed the kids to was the following year in 8th grade, and they analyzed which kids got into discipline trouble. Something that seems to have nothing to do with academics or even with writing. And I was so struck by this data point when I saw it that I didn't even make my own slide. I copied it directly from the research study. And so the term they used in the study was not neutral expectations and high expectations. The kids who got the neutral message were called placebo, and the kids who got the high expectations message were called the kids who got a wise feedback message. And here's what happened 1 year later in 8th grade to those kids who got that one different message in 7th grade. For white kids, it had no difference. They were no more likely statistically to get into discipline trouble. But look what happened to the African American kids. The kids who got the neutral message got into disciplinary trouble in their middle school at the rate that they had historically, African American kids had historically gotten into trouble in that school. But look what happened to those African American kids who got that high expectations message 1 year later. But what really blew my mind is in this study, they were able to follow those same middle school kids 5.5 years later until they enrolled in college. And here's what happened to those kids. White kids, no difference between high expectations and neutral, but look what happened to those African American kids. 40% of the kids who got the neutral message ended up enrolled in college, 70% got the high expectations message. Now, if we had more time together, like I like to do, where we're in a small group, we would stop right here and begin to dialogue about what could have happened? How could that possibly be true? In the interest of time, let me just suggest that that different message delivered by that teacher at that critical moment may have changed two really important things in those kids' lives. First, it may have changed the way that middle school student saw himself or herself, saw getting feedback on their paper, saw the relationship with their teacher, in this case, a teacher of a different race. But equally importantly, it may have changed not just the kids' perceptions, but the teacher's perceptions. Suddenly seeing kids do things that they didn't expect that they could do, and did that actually start what you might almost call a positive snowball rolling down a hill, in which that relational connection at the right moment had an impact that lasted literally years later, and an outcome that we know in today's society, going to college, has huge implications for those kids' lifelong well-being. It's almost like if you tried to graph what I just described for you in that case study, it could look kind of like two different pathways to the future for kids. If we think about the beginning of it, with that square, there's an initial event. In this study, the initial event was being asked to write an essay about your personal hero and getting feedback on the essay. For some kids, the high expectations message started a trajectory in which I was told, not only do you have high expectations for me, but you believe I can do it. So what happened with that? I revised the essay. I put in more work. And what did that lead to? That led to an improved outcome. Whether I was a white kid or an African American kid, I got better feedback from my teacher, and hopefully I actually learned to become a better writer. Everything I just put there on that trajectory is kind of predictable, yet another no-brainer. But here's potentially the power of what really happened in that experiment. It's right there. Suddenly, when that kid has that better experience, it's reinforcing who I am. I'm the kind of kid who rises to the challenge and takes on tougher stuff and succeeds. The thing that sometimes gets scary about this and makes me almost never want to talk to another kid ever again is that there's another path that our words and language can start kids down. If you got the neutral message, or even a more negative message, remember the message I just showed you was not negative. It didn't say, I'm really disappointed that you have made this many mistakes on your essay. It was just neutral. It simply said, here's your feedback. But for some of those kids, neutral was not enough. They needed that message that was about high expectations and belief. So some kids got that neutral message. I didn't put forth any additional effort. So what happened? I got my expected, usual, not very satisfying outcome. And again, that reinforced this sense that I'm not the kind of kid who rises to those challenges. And so those relational connections that we have with kids are so powerful, with implications lasting not just weeks, but years. So, moving toward a close, this work with kids that all of us are doing needs to have a sense of urgency, not just because of the kind of data I just showed you, but because in our work we're actually starting to find that in kids that we're working with today, we've come to know the term achievement gap over the last 20 years. There's beginning evidence of a relationship gap of kids in schools today in a very diverse array of communities, including communities that look a lot like Prior Lake Savage. We're finding that in any given sample, about 16% of the kids are like relationship magnets. They have got a ton of connections, 5 or more with adults in their lives. Then we've got kids who have got plenty, but they're at a different level. They are, sorry, I'm having a little clicker challenge here. 44%, they're in that next space. 18% say I've got one. Often, but not always, a family member. But here's the point. that I want to actually begin to focus us on as we look toward closing. In sample after sample, including relatively advantaged affluent communities, we're finding 1 in 5 kids saying, I'm not experiencing these 5 elements with any adults in my lives. And if you think about in your class, in your schools, 1 in 5 of those kids who are not experiencing caring, challenge, support, sharing power, and growth, the implications for what's happening, not just for those kids, but for your whole group, can be pretty significant. So what do we do? If there was one big idea I wanted to leave you with as how you begin to use these 5 elements, the key idea is being intentional. Not just expecting relationships to happen, but actually baking them into the work that you do with kids every day. So before you plan a lesson, your curriculum, a unit, what you're going to do with kids, do you explicitly think about the relationships? How am I going to connect with these kids relationally? When you are in a moment with kids, whether you're teaching or talking to them in a hallway or working with them as a counselor or in food service, you're asking, what is happening now and how do I strengthen this relationship? And then after you're connecting with kids, whether it's at the end of the day when you go home and think about how things went, or at the end of a school year, do you reflect back and do you ask, how well did the relationships work and what could we do better over time? We're also going to send out to you after this session a simple 1-page tool that I would hope most of you would complete that will help you identify your area of strength in these 5 areas and an area for growth. I will tell you that my particular area for growth when I've done this is in the share power category, but it would be interesting to see where you are. And it's really interesting for you to share as colleagues where your strengths are and where your areas for growth are. When I have more time to work, especially with teachers, we actually have people line up along a wall where they have their areas of strength and areas for growth. And very often, colleagues who work together every day, maybe in classrooms next to each other, are shocked at how people assess their own relational capacity with kids, because we just don't take time very often to talk about this stuff and to share strategies for what works. There's one other very practical tool that we're going to send out to you as kind of a takeaway from this presentation. It's a simple thing you could use at the beginning of the school year. It's called the 4 S's interview. And it's a simple exercise that you can do with a group of kids or you can do with one kid. And you try and get inside kids' personalities and beings by asking them about 4 things. Their sparks. What do they love to do? What do they get up in the morning and they would be thrilled to spend the whole day doing? Where do they feel most alive? Their strengths. What are their abilities? What are they good at? But not just what are they good at, what are their values? What do they care about? Things like being loyal, being there for their friends. Struggles, what are the things they worry about? What are the things that they actually, whether it's a small thing like the normal challenges of adolescence or a big thing that they're struggling with like kids who've undergone something traumatic, and supports. Who are the people and places in their worlds that make them feel good? And so you are also going to get after this a simple version of that 4 S's interview. And it's something, as I say, you can use with one kid, you can use with a group of kids. When you know a kid's 4 S's, it really puts you in a different zone with that kid. And the main reason we find is that you're trying to say to that young person or those young people, I want to know the whole you. I want to know not just what's great about you or what you're struggling with, not just what you can do in school, but what you love to do. And it begins to create that space for the kind of relational connections that upon which you can build a developmental relationship. So let me end with one thing that actually we are not struggling with, but we're thinking about in our work, which is what is a simple metaphor for the power of a developmental relationship? We actually have 2 candidates here, and I ask you to raise your hand to vote for one of them. And I'll tell you afterward which one is the one that I have been voting for. The first one is this one. It's that developmental relationships are like the roots in a tree. That when kids have these relationships in their lives, they can grow, they can thrive in healthy and strong ways. They can withstand the storms that life throws at them. And that the soil around kids, if it's rich, like what I know you're trying to build here at Prior Lake Savage, it can actually help kids put down healthy roots. But if it's full of toxins or if it's barren, that's going to affect kids' growth and development as well. So metaphor number 1 for the power of relationships, developmental relationships, is roots of a tree. Metaphor number 2 is this one. Fluoride in toothpaste. That a developmental relationship is like the thing in a product or in a recipe that brings the whole rest of the product or the recipe to life. You could brush your teeth forever with toothpaste that has no fluoride, but when you have that fluoride there, you're actually activating the rest of what you're doing. So the curriculum might be great, everything else might be great, but if you don't have the relationship, you're missing that active ingredient. So, if I was going to ask you which you were going to choose, how many of you would say the best metaphor that is most compelling for you for a developmental relationship is roots on a tree? How many of you go with fluoride and toothpaste? Okay, those of us who are fluoride people, we lost again. Because I'm a fluoride person, and it's failing miserably. So either one that comes to your mind, keep it in your head. Either these are roots in a tree that you're providing kids with, or these are fluoride and toothpaste. Now I started with my personal story, and let me come back and say I'm pleased to say my 3 kids have turned out well. And I found this old picture of Lauren sitting on some roots, so I thought I would end it. She's now 23 and living in New York and doing well, and my son Adam's ready to go off to college, as is Katie's son Thomas, and Victoria's a high school student in St. Paul. So things have worked out pretty well for me, but as I think back on those difficult years, if I had had some kind of a playbook, if I had had a roadmap for relationships, both my work as a parent and my work as a teacher, I think might have been even more powerful. But the good news, as I mentioned, whether it was that early childhood teacher in Ronnie or the many teachers my kids had during those difficult years, other people stepped in. And so as you're going into the beginning of the school year this year, think about if your students called you 10 years, 20 years from now, what would you hope they'd say? I'll tell you, I've showed that video that I showed at the beginning to kids once in a while, and one kid said once, "Why are they going into the red box?" So as you're thinking about it, and I want to end here with one short audio file that is a story between a student and a teacher that powerfully, for me, captures this whole idea of a developmental relationship and the work that you guys are doing every day. So, final snippet from the guys in the booth here before we
And on this last Friday of 2012, it is time for StoryCorps, recording conversations about the most important moments in our lives. Today we hear from John Pruitt and his 3rd grade teacher, Cecile Doyle. John tracked down Mrs. Doyle decades after he was in her class. The former student and teacher talked about 1958 when John's mother, who was seriously ill, died shortly before Christmas.
We talked about decorating the Christmas tree when I came home from school that day. But I walked into the living room, and my aunt was there, and she said, "Well, honey, Mommy passed away this morning." And I remember at my mother's wake, someone in my family came to me and said, "Johnny, your teacher's here."
When I found out she died, I could certainly relate to that, because when I was 11, my own father died, and you just don't know how you're going to go on without that person.
When I returned to school, you waited until the other children left the room at the end of the day, and you told me that you were there if I needed you. When you bent over and kissed me on the head, it was really the only time someone said to me, "I know what you're feeling, and I know what you're missing." And I felt in a very real way that things really would be okay.
Well, John, I really loved you as a student, and I'm so glad that I could be there with you for that time.
Many years later, when I became a teacher, I started to think more and more about you, and I started to think to myself, here I am with a memory of a teacher who changed my life, and I've never told her that. And that's why I finally wrote this letter. Dear Mrs. Doyle, if you are not the Cecile Doyle who taught English at Emerson School in Kearney, New Jersey, then I'm embarrassed, and you can disregard the sentiments that follow. My name is John Pruitt, and I was in your 3rd grade class during the 1958-1959 school year. 2 days before Christmas, my mother passed away, and you told me that you were there if I needed you. I hope life has been as kind to you as you were to me. God bless you, always. With great fondness, John.
And your letter could not have come at a better time, because my husband had Parkinson's, and he was going downhill, and I had just come home from the hospital, and I read this beautiful letter, and I just was overwhelmed.
Well, the funny thing is, when I finally wrote to you again after 54 years, I typed the letter. I was afraid my penmanship wasn't going to meet your standard. Well, after all this time, Mrs. Doyle, all I can say to you is, thank you.
John, what can I say? I'm just glad that we made a difference in each other's life.
So you are on the cusp of another school year. Every impact you have with a kid may not be that deep, but as we saw in that Post-it note story, every impact, every interaction can have lasting impact. And I know that as you get back to your classrooms and your buildings, all of these other things that seem so urgent are going to be in front of you. and they are urgent. But I hope that you'll remember that in the long run, it depends. Like literally, it all depends on the relationships. Have a great year.
Thank you, Kent, for helping us reflect on our practices, our goals, and the impact that we will continue to have with kids. We do have an assessment now, as you may have guessed, right? We've got a speaker, we've got an assessment. As you watch this video of our students, I want you to pay attention to those 5 characteristics that Kent just described and see where you note expressing care, challenging growth, providing support, sharing power, and exploring possibilities.
One adult that I very well connected with at Prior Lake High School is actually Miss Tice. Every single time I come in, I just have a nice conversation with her, and it's very casual, and it just makes me feel like I'm at home.
There's been a lot of female teachers here at the school who have really encouraged me to not only be myself, but like get outside of who I am and learn from others and really just stay true to who I am.
Pre-AP English with Miss Jones. And it's that personalized one-on-one attention that she gave me that I credit right now to why I'm the writer I am today.
He's just funny, he's relatable, and he's a really good teacher. He was my AP Human Geography teacher my freshman year, but he still lets me put my coat and my backpack in his room if I need to, and I feel like if I needed anything, I could go and talk to him about it.
Coach James, and he's always been there for me, always trusted me, always believing in me and thinking I can do better. And sometimes when I'm down, he's always there to help pick me up.
A big problem here I've run into in Prior Lake is diversity. It's not much something that we have here. I think it's something that we can still work on and be more welcoming of and have it less be of kind of an awkwardness that we have here.
He was just a hard teacher to learn from, and so that taught me to really take initiative and go on Schoology and learn by myself.
In 10th grade, I jumped into like 2 or 3 AP classes, and it was tough, but then the teachers, they helped me a lot with it and understood where I was coming from. And
just that one short conversation, 5 minutes, pulling me aside at the speech meet, changed my whole outlook.
It was like a little bit of a shell shock seeing how many people were here compared to my other school, but like people started coming up to me and they started just like encouraging me to like hang out with them and like having conversations with me, and it just really had me fit in, and it was just a great experience.
There'll be projects and multiple classes that are due in the same day, and it's kind of put a high stress level on some students. And there's also student athletes. They're very busy with sports, and then there's regular students who are probably busy with jobs.
I think something that we could maybe implement or add into here would be more of like college readiness things. Like at this point I'm going to be a senior and I don't even know how to apply for college. Like math helps me, but I need to know how to do taxes, insurance, and things like that.
Obviously, there's times when people have their phones out, but I have seen like examples where teachers just get on them about it right away, and then it just makes the student that much more frustrated because they didn't really get a warning, and it just makes the situation a lot more tougher than what it was in the first place.
I think that if they made a little more effort to get to know each student personally, they can help them relate whatever they're learning back to their own lives if they're having a little bit of difficulty, because I know that really helps me, is relating it back to real life. I like how I've been able to develop relationships with my teachers, so it's easier for me to ask questions. And it's also taught me time management with balancing school, sports, and friends.
I feel like since there are so many people at this high school, I feel like if someone were to go to, let's say, Normandale or like a community college, there's around the same numbers, so it's like you're kind of used to like being around all of the people at all times.
One thing I'm big on that I would like to possibly try out in college would be sports management, and so there was a sports management and marketing class here that I was able to take.
They care about their students very much, so it's always a plus with that.
Overall, Prior Lake is a very positive environment, and I feel safe learning here, and I love everybody here.
It's the support that all the teachers and staff gave me. It's the individualized help.
We all have a great community here.
So that video actually was created by our new director of assessment research and continuous improvement, Chrislyn Goodman, and it had nothing to do with today. It had to do with, as we think about the academic results of our students, we also wanted to get the voices and that anecdotal evidence about how are we doing. But I think it speaks really clearly to Kent's message about the amazing work that we do. Our students told us that we build strong relationships, and we do, and we just heard, and even before you heard this research, you knew the importance of building relationships with students. Students and parents are counting on you. They're counting on you to make sure that the data on this question gets up to 100% at both the elementary and the secondary level. I hope most of you can name a student who would say your name and that you were that one adult. And like Kent, I challenge you to make sure that you're really intentional in what you do this year to ensure that that does happen. I'd like to invite Russ stage right now to share a little bit of his intentionality and how he builds relationships. He shared his transformational leadership purpose with the administrative team. He shared it with his coaches here and coaches across the state, and he's sharing it with audiences across the country. So I asked him if he would just speak briefly to us about some of the thinking that he does around intentionality. Thanks, Russ.
Good morning, everyone. I can't help but think of my high school speech teacher and what she might be thinking right now with me coming out on stage. I wasn't the best student when I was in schools, and yet I'm here today because I'm a product of really great teachers that cared a whole lot about me. So I'm excited to be here to share really why I lead and why I lead the way I do. I need to take you back a few years to 2012. I read a book. It was called The Inside Out Coaching, How Sports Can Transform Lives. And I read that book because I thought it would make me a better activities director, and it did. But it also made me a better person, a better husband, a better father, a better friend, and a better colleague. This book is about leading a purpose-based life. It's about identifying your core values, reflecting on why those values are so important to you and to me, and what experiences did you, the reader, have that led you to really grasp and hold on to these core values. So I landed on love more, serve more, and find value. And today I want to share with you why those three are so important to me, and then how I'm intentional every day about coming to work to teach and model those core values. Love more. So who in my life taught me that loving more was important? And I could tell stories about my family. Really, my mom, she's the most unconditionally loving person I've ever met in my life. In fact, I grew up as an identical twin brother, and every day she taught me that she loved me more. Just don't tell my brother Rob. But really, I want to share with you an experience that I had with a middle school band teacher. When I was in middle school, I thought going to school was more about socializing. I thought it was about meeting girls. And I love that about school. So one day I'm in the back row and I'm playing tuba, and Miss Siebert stops the band and she says, "Rusty, I need to speak with you out in the hallway." And I thought, uh-oh, she's gonna let me have it. I mean, I wasn't really on task that particular day. We walk out in the hallway together and she says, "Why did you want to play tuba in the first place?" And I said, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, my girlfriend's in percussion and she sits close." And she took a deep breath, and I'll never forget, this is the moment she chose to love more. She said, "Rusty, whether you like it or not, you're a leader. And the kids in that room are going to follow you. And you can use it for good or for bad, but I want you to know that I believe in you." And she walked back into the room. And I remember thinking to myself, from this point forward, everything I do is going to be to please Miss Siebert and to make sure that I prove her right. Because she chose to love more, and it worked. My second is serve more. So who in my life taught me that service of others was so important? And I want to tell you a quick story about Russell Andrew Reed Sr. I'm the third. So this is my grandfather, part of the greatest generation. He was a Pearl Harbor survivor. In fact, Russell Andrew Reed Sr. was on the USS Ward that fired the first shot of World War II for the United States. They sunk a Japanese submarine 2 hours before the planes flew over. No one believed them at the time. In fact, it took 50 years until students from the University of Hawaii found that sunken submarine. But my grandfather decided on that day that he would live his life in service of others because he survived Pearl Harbor. And he came back and he became a pipe fitter for 40 years. And every day he went to work, he felt like he was helping someone else. He felt like he was in service of other people. And when he retired, he had earned the right to relax. He had earned the right to enjoy his retirement. But instead, he signed up to volunteer with the American Red Cross. He drove the Bloodmobile 5 days a week, basically until the day he died. And I saw him do this. And he did it for service, in service of others. And it imprinted on me. See, the people that have the greatest influences on us, what they weave into us, that's what comes out of us. And that's why we have such an important job here, because we're weaving us into our students every single day. My last one is find value. Find value in every situation, find value in every person. So who was it that taught me that? I didn't have the easiest childhood. I had a lot of adversity to overcome, and I was a tough student. But again, I had a teacher and a coach. He was a Phi-Ed health teacher, and he was a track coach. He is why I aspired to be a Phi-Ed teacher and a health coach. I take that back. A Phi-Ed and health teacher and a coach. His name was Mr. Kendrick, and he just retired. And we had a conversation similar to the one you heard on that audio to end the presentation today. But he taught me very early on, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail. Losing is okay, because that's where the growth takes place. See, there's value in adversity. In every situation that came to me in my life that I went to him for advice on, he taught me to find the value. And not only that, he taught me to find value in everyone. So when I was named captain of my high school track team, I had no idea what that meant. What do captains do? He said, Rusty, your job is to make sure everybody on this team feels included. They need to feel a sense of belonging. They need to feel like they're a part of something bigger than self. And I need your help in doing that. Find value, instill value in everyone and in every situation. So as I'm reading this book in 2012, I'm thinking to myself, okay, love, value, and serve. And I'm also thinking about the people in my life that influence me to choose these core values of love, serve, and value. And so now I'm an activities director, and every day I show up to work and I think to myself, what is my purpose? How will I lead? What do I want to be remembered for? What will be said about me at my eulogy? And so I have to be intentional every day about love, serve, and value. So when I get to work, I love more. I love more with every fist bump, with every high five, with every pat on the back. I love more when I greet staff by name, when I greet students by name, when I make eye contact, when I smile. I'm loving more. I use the word love every chance I get. Man, I love coming to your class. I love seeing you play. I love going to your game. I love my wife. I love my students. I love more. And the next one is service. So how am I intentional every day about serving others? It's my goal every day when somebody walks into my office that they feel like it's the most important conversation that I have in that day. I have to stop what I'm doing. I have to listen. I have to figure out what it is that that person needs that I can do for them. And at the end of every day, I think to myself, did I help someone get better today? But I also model service. Modeling service is easy. It's picking up garbage on your way in from the parking lot. It's helping the custodians at the end of a basketball game put chairs away. I model service by wiping tables at lunch. Why do I do this? Well, I want my coaches to serve their athletes and families. I want to see teachers serve their students. I want students to learn to serve each other in hopes that when they leave this place, they're more likely to serve their neighbor. And the last one is value. How do I come to work every single day and strive to find value in every situation and every person? When my phone rings, it's usually not someone telling me that I'm doing a great job. They're calling to tell me I need to start doing something or I need to stop doing something. And you know what? They're not wrong. You see, there's value in what they're sharing with me. My parents, there's a lot of emotion behind every decision made in my department. And these parents want what's in the best interest of their child. And then I think about me as a parent. And I step into that empathy lens and I think, okay, how would I feel if I was in this situation? That's finding value. Why do I try to find value in everyone and every situation? Because I need my coaches to find value in losing. I need them to teach that same lesson that I learned from my coach. There's value in every situation and everybody. So here's my challenge to you. What are your core values? How will you come to work every single day and be intentional? Have you thought about why they're important to you? And I didn't just land here. There's 4 really important questions I think you need to ask yourself. The first question is, why do you teach? Why do you lead? Why do you coach? Why'd you get into this in the first place? And what keeps you coming back every single year? And then the second question is, why do you teach the way you do? Or why do you lead or coach the way you do? Who was it that influenced you? Who did you learn from? Who do you aspire to be? What do you want said about you when you're done in this profession? The third question is, how does it feel to be coached, how does it feel to be taught by me, or led by me, or coached by me? And this is really important because I think we can change the way kids experience school. I think if we can have a meaningful connection with our students, if we can find a way to listen and to learn and to figure out what it is they need from us to reach their full potential, I think we can change the arc of every student's life. I think we can put them on a path to be successful after high school. The fourth question that I think is really important for all of us to answer is, how will we define our own success? At the end of the day, how do we know if we were successful? At the end of this semester, at the end of the school year, what will we gauge our success on? If you can figure out your own core values, and you can share them in a way that I just did today, and then you base your success on those values. Did you teach them? Did you model them? Did your students teach them back at you? You see, these core models, these core values can be learned. Therefore, they can be taught, but they can't be taught if they're not modeled. So every day, you have to come to work intentional about teaching and modeling your core values. Look inside and really figure out why they're important to you. I come to school every day to love more, serve more, and find value. I wish you the best this school year. I love you all.
How lucky are we to have him to hang with? You know, I've been blessed, you've heard me say this before, I have been so blessed throughout my life to be able to serve with really amazing teammates. And I've got a whole lot right here in front of me, a whole lot right here, and Russ Reeds is certainly one of those. As he said, I really hope that you establish or reestablish your why this year, so that you can every morning get up and recommit to that. Your students can feel it, your colleagues can feel it, your children at home and your families can feel it, because it takes that intentionality every single day to ensure that we're giving our best to those around us. This photo is from my first kickoff 4 years ago. As part of my desire to build relationships with our students, our band kids first, and with you, I wanted to play in the marching band when they played the school song. So I'm a drummer, which is going to mean more over the next 15 minutes. But more so than being a drummer, I'm an educator, and I truly believe that those minutes that Russ was talking about with his band teacher, those minutes, those moments in time where we can either lean into loving or lean into disregard or criticism or judgment, those moments are what a guy years later remembers, or what a gentleman who spoke to his third grade teacher remembers at the funeral of one of his parents. Those are defining moments in our careers and in our lives. And the video that I'm going to share with you right now has such a moment, and it was actually really funny because as Kent was preparing today and going through his slide deck, he was going to show this video, and I'm like, oh no, I got this one. So with that, I want you to take a look at that video.
I have a lot of memories from when I was a child. One that's always stuck out to me though was when I was about 10 years old and I was in school and I struggled. And I didn't struggle with English, math, or science. I struggled holding still. And I would try to listen, focus, and process ideas, but I couldn't help myself. And to be honest, I would sit there and then I would just start tapping. And the students in the class would look at me and they'd say, hey, stop tapping. A lot of the time, I didn't even realize I was doing it. And then eventually even the teachers got after me and they would yell at me and they'd say, Clint, you have to stop tapping. It got so bad that I got sent to the principal's office for tapping. And he said to me, okay, maybe when you go back to class, just try sitting on your hands. So I did. I went back to class, and when I felt myself starting to tap, I did this. I sat on my hands. And that worked for about 5 seconds. One time I was tapping in class, and my teacher, Mr. Jensen, looked at me, and he yelled. And he said, Clint, stay after class. And I thought to myself, this is it. I am done. Now, I've always been the type of person that believes that a single moment in time can change a person's life. And this was one of those moments for me, and I will never forget it. And so I was sitting there with Mr. Jensen and an empty classroom. And he walked past me and he sat next to his desk and he said, Clint, come here, I want to talk to you. And as he looked me right in the eye, he said, now I need you to know something, you're not in trouble. But I do have just one question that I have to ask you. And he asked, he said, have you ever thought about playing the drums? And in that moment, Mr. Jensen, he leaned back and he opened the top drawer of his desk. And he reached in and he pulled out my very first pair of drumsticks. And he held them in his hands and he looked at me and he said, hey Clint, you're not a problem. I think you're a drummer. I've never put those sticks down. I've toured, recorded, and played drums all over the world. My whole college education was paid for with drumsticks in my hand. Just because of a single moment in time when somebody believed in me, and he saw something in me that I didn't even see within myself. And from that moment, I learned that there's a difference between being the best in the world and being the best for the world.
That's personalized learning at its best. As you kick off this new year, think about how you can strive to be more like a Mr. Jensen, whether you're a teacher or not. I want our students to remind you of the many ways that you already are the Mr. Jensens in their lives. Thank you for everything. I love serving as a superintendent of Prior Lake Savage Area Schools with all of you, and I absolutely love and believe in you, and I'm confident this is going to be our best year yet. Thank you.
We are Lakers.
The Laker way means pride, respect, responsibility.
We inspire students to do their best.
To be their best.
This is our house.
And in our house, everyone is welcome.
Respected and understood. Sure, we're pretty big.
But every student is seen.
Every student learns their own way.
We are focused on the future.
We prepare students for the jobs of tomorrow.
Want to build something? Create it.
Want to experience the business world? Go there.
Looking for something new? Dream it. We are serious about learning.
And about having fun.
We've got more than 60 co-curriculars.
There's something for everyone.
Our teachers are dedicated.
Dedicated. We all take pride in our school.
And in our community.
This is the Laker way.
And we
are Lakers.
Have a great Laker Day.
Relationships matter. Relationships with notes and our instruments help us to play this music and perform for all of you.
Relationships matter. The relationships we have with each other help us trust each other and know that we will all march in proper places during performances as we awe the crowd.
Relationships matter. Relationships with our community allow us to perform for those who care about us at our concerts at Prior Lake High School, in our local community, and statewide events.
Relationships matter. Relationships allow us to have fun, laugh, and enjoy our friendships.
Relationships matter. Relationships allow us to work hard and be the best that we can be, both individually and collectively.
Relationships matter. Relationships with our teachers, administration, and support staff, all of you, encourage us to express ourselves and love the music that we play.
Relationships matter. Relationships give us a sense of belonging that helps us want to come to school. It pushes us to do well in our classes. And relationships inspire us to want to represent our school, because we are Lakers.
Relationships matter. Welcome back, staff. We all thank you for all that you do for us, and we are excited for this next year.